But you're good.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's amazing.
So the council plan.
Like, just done last year. I'm like,
That's why it's here.
We're doing Elizabeth Ann Freeman's house and
Yes. They're willing to live in Dan Freeman's house and they can't afford the hire. Just so you know, we have right now, waiting
you're like
for our first time.
my water broke. And I took a client call.
Home buyer down payment.
And then I called my boss and I was like,
We're developing it.
so listen, I think I'm done for the day.
Yeah.
She was like, just like I called me. I was like, I know, my water broke like this. I was like, she's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm really trying to help transition before I go out on maternity.
Yeah, I feel like public
Oh, I hear that. Because I really do think that 50% is that Asian love and about 50% is the need layer of county contributions in those projects that state and federal funding in order to make them more economically viable for developers. So I'm going to tell you right now, like, you're the artist walk.
cool down up there, though? Yeah, a little bit.
Those developers are capable of layering low-income housing tax credits.
Yeah. I don't know, you know, normally it's freezing.
Section
I brought my jacket. Yeah.
they're layering probably 5 or 6. Right? So if the town acted as the largest of the tax layers, in order to make those projects for 3% AMI,
It's gonna be really cool to kind of see, like, for their successes with it and also their challenges and like the higher team living thing. It's all
right? Yes. So there is, I think we have a really totally valid and we get to know outside of revenue.
Sorry, I'm like, I'm really hungry, but oh my God, my mouth's on fire.
How are you otherwise?
But there is some value to a variety.
It's even I feel like I should be, but like, good. I just finally got to do my Mother's Day trip. So finally got to do that. That was amazing.
Were you just stay there for weekends or night?
3 nights. That's amazing. I saw like all these girlfriends I haven't seen in a year and a half. It was amazing.
Use combination.
He's gonna go with his volunteer. He's trying to figure out camping, biking and camping.
Well, yeah, I have 9
Alone.
Not have to deal with anything else.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I
Like,
went to my country to 3 girlfriends. The first time I went away, and I was like,
right? It's amazing. I know, it feels so nice. Oh my God, wait. I know, right?
thanks, Shauna.
Got it modified. Public staff.
Yeah.
It's just that he can
This will be exciting.
right.
It's working.
Yeah, I think that's a good
Great
solution.
one.
I think you're just throwing it in.
Yes. Emily Sessions said there were 3 applications for the program, so that's great.
We also try to
Which I know is going to happen here too, so.
I thought it was in
They have
person
like
too, but then it was
yeah,
easier.
this is like a
So
separate.
it'll be very interesting.
Yes. Totally, yeah. And then we don't want to totally. Right. Oh, yeah, no, yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. Can I please be out of so much
With that said, I think having,
I'll let her know. Right, I need 2 bedrooms, whatever, yeah. Here's your dinner.
So funny. I had very much afraid from texting this vacation. I was like, oh, no, you're So if I just bail at 8:45, I'm just gonna bail. And just,
Exactly, I was doing it, I was like, this is awkward. So let's do this.
Something that I follow.
how you go about it.
Exactly.
John, you can go on.
It's
Just
Go while it's working.
Councilmember Henderson.
Just temperature work for you guys?
Okay.
So?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
it's great.
It was really
Thanks,
warm
yeah.
to start, but it's good now.
It's a little cool. Cool. Set points.
wait, perfect. It's perfect.
This works.
It's, yeah, it's great.
Sorry.
I totally understand.
good old Chuck.
Okay, we are back. Meeting is back in session. We are on to item 7.2, fiscal year 2021 through 2023, Town Council priorities and work plan quarterly update. And Jen Calloway, you've got this one, right?
We've all collectively got this, but I'm
We
going to
have
present
collectively got
this. Thank you, Mayor and council members. So this is, again, a new process for the council. This was the first year that we memorialized a work plan to move council priorities forward, and we committed to quarterly updates in that process. So this is the first quarterly update that you're receiving, and I want you to keep in mind, I would ask you to keep in mind that quarterly, so this has been 3 months, effectively 12 weeks, 6 council meetings, and this is what's been accomplished in that time period. And I want to say that because I think really to acknowledge the amount of staff work that has gone into helping to move your council priorities forward in addition to the regular quarter services that we provide every day. So with that in mind, just again a reminder, we said when we started out on this endeavor that we estimate spending 80-90% of our time on core services. We had a kind of a follow-up conversation that COVID was taking an additional 5 to 10% of that time. We were definitely ramped down on the COVID front, but we have ramped up on the PSOM power shutoff front. So that is still an unexpected that we're dealing with, but we fortunately planned for that in some ways by hiring our emergency management coordinator. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So I'm going to be fairly high level and pretty brief. There was a lot of detail provided in the staff report. You have a really comprehensive work plan, and there was updates provided in that. So I want to make sure we have time for discussion and questions. And if there's any feedback on how you would prefer to see these reports come forward in the future, we're open to that. It's kind of an evolving process, so we want to make sure it's working for you as a council and the community. So in March, the council formally adopted your priorities. There were 5 priorities that you agreed upon. That was dealing with workforce housing, greenhouse gas emissions, and environmental sustainability, communications and community cohesion, investment in key infrastructure, including connectivity and the new library, transit and trails, and enhanced partnerships and investments for emergency preparedness, and that includes wildfire readiness and mitigation. So in the report, we outlined those task items under the work plan that were complete or substantially complete. For purposes of this, we defined substantially complete as 50% or more, just to give some reference to that. And then we also outlined other work plan items that were in process in some form. They were less than 50% complete. But for our housing of our workforce, we have 1 item complete with our Civic Sparks Fellow. The task item was to successfully apply for, so we've done that, we've made an offer, and that person will be starting in September. So we've considered that complete. And there's a number of other task items that we've moved forward, 50% or more. A lot of these you have had discussions with over the last 3 months, and perhaps a little bit preceding that. For our climate action and sustainability priority, you have about 5 items that are complete. You've recently approved sustainable purchasing guidelines, our clean fleet purchasing policy. We have completed our energy efficiency initiatives, and that is the lighting upgrade per the last building audit, our regional collaboration on litter mitigation, and our partnership with Tahoe Donor Association and Gunshire Homeowners Association. And again, a number of items that are substantially complete under this priority. Communications and community cohesion. We have finalized a contract with 101.5 FM and Truckee-Tahoe Media for communications, as well as implemented a town survey tool. You'll recall we issued our bike/transportation survey not too long ago and had over 200 respondents. So as we do more surveys using that tool, we'll continue to grow, hopefully, the responses that we receive and the people signed up to receive that. And we have a number of items that are substantially complete. We do have some staffing coverage issues that you won't expect to see significant progress on these made in the next quarter until we get fully staffed again. But that will happen as soon as we are back to our regular staffing. We have some employees out for various personal reasons. So. Infrastructure and community connectivity. We've completed the acquisition of the Truckee Springs land that was closed escrow at the end of May, and a number of other items that many of you will have seen around the community in progress, specifically the Brockway Trail connection that is moving along nicely. And then emergency partnerships. So we have hired our full-time emergency operations manager as of July 1. Mr. Womack is on board, and his time has been consumed with PSOMs and area fires. So we are glad to have him on, and thanks to the council and the community for the support in hiring that position and the foresight for the need of that position. We've also done some GIS activity to support zone-based evacuations and fire inspections for STRs. We've done a number of partnerships to support the tax measure for the fire district, inspections on STRs for fire safety, and our contract with CAL FIRE for wildland fire suppression. We've worked on the Weather Ready Nation through Reno National Weather Service. That's been complete. You will hear a presentation on that when time fits in a schedule, so you can expect a little bit more on that. And our town hall style presentations for the HOAs, we've done over 12 of those at this point, which was the plan for the year, and a number of items that are well on their way to completion, if not nearing completion. So along with the 5 work priorities that the council adopted, we identified a 6th priority that we referred to as significant operational strategic priorities. These were things at the staff level that we felt were imperative to continue moving forward and wanted the council and the community to know that staff time would be spent on these throughout the year, including the public art program, implementing public art projects, technology upgrades and maintenance, our visitor center transit information plan, and then we did remove the Sister Cities program in a previous council discussion. So just a reminder on that. And lastly, we had a bike rack of items, and these were items that rose to the attention of council, were not specifically identified in a work action item or task due to limitations in capacity. Throughout the last 3 months, we've had 3 items that we've added to the bike rack, a couple of which we're going to discuss a little bit more detail. One being a smoke-free community, updated building and energy audit, a feasibility study for a biomass facility, emergency housing measures, and trail striping. So we have added those to the bike rack so they are not lost in future discussions. And just a couple of notes, unexpected events. We are now dealing with PSOMs. As you all know, those are the power shutoffs that we are anticipating this summer into fall. So that's consumed virtually all of Mr. Womack's time in the last several weeks, and supported by not only staff in the police department, the town manager's office, department head team, as we prepare our buildings and make sure we are prepared for those shutoffs and continue operations. So a lot of staff time has gone into preparation for that. We also have the American Rescue Plan Act funding. We're still waiting on some final determination on specifics for what we can use that for. We do plan to come back to council. It's $4 million. So we do plan to come back to council with some options. That is not currently in the work plan, but something that we obviously don't want to lose track of and want to make sure that we're following very closely. And then in addition to the ARPA funds, there's just an infusion of federal and state funding right now. So we meet regularly with our lobbyists. We are watching what some of those bills are and what the funding is coming down for with the Infrastructure Act, for example, what we may need to shift our priority and our focus on in order to leverage that funding. So you are apt to see some standalone items come forward that are either further out in the work plan or not on the work plan, but given these funding opportunities may make sense for council to consider acting on immediately. That, of course, would potentially affect another work plan item that we were planning to work on. So we would have that discussion at that time. And I just want to make sure that council is aware that we are spending some energy on tracking these so we don't lose out on those opportunities. So really what we're asking you tonight is to receive this quarterly update. If you do have any feedback on how you'd like to see future reports presented, we are open to hearing that. But more specifically, staff is recommending that we be nimble and flexible and adjust our plan when we see opportunities to do that. So we are recommending accelerating our biomass discussion. We've been researching that option. We visited North Star, had great conversations with the general manager there. We visited the biomass facility down in Quincy, had some really good conversations with there. And when I say we, it's town staff in partnership with the general manager at the airport district and Chief Celine. So we really are trying to have this be a partnership opportunity. We've spoken with the consultant that has completed the feasibility studies for both of those North Star and Quincy projects, and feel that there's a potential funding opportunity and it's a good time to move forward on that now. So if council agrees with that, we would bring back a scoping study and feasibility study for consideration and partnership and cost sharing with our 2 partners in that program. Also, the emergency housing measures, we're recommending to move that forward, specifically the long-term grant program. We see opportunities to amend that program to be more responsive to the immediate need and offering a different type of incentive for that. If council wishes, we would hope to bring that back at the end of July or early August. That's our target with those modifications. And again, to be responsive to what we see as the urgency need right now. And lastly, the updated building energy audit. So that was discussed in the workshops for budget. We did set aside funding to support that. There was some conversations about moving that forward or not. So we're asking for direction from council on if you'd like us to proceed. There's ample budget in the approved budget to do so, and it's up to council's direction if we want to spend the staff time on that or not. So those are the 3 items we'd specifically like direction on. And with that, I'm going to stop my presentation, and most of us are here, all the department head team, and there's representatives from each area that we can answer any specific questions you have on tasks and where they are in progress.
Speed update. Good job, Jen. And I just want to start by thanking everybody for being here. I know it's late, and we keep you guys here late often, and we have a broadcast of staff members, so thank you to each of you for being here. Okay, with that, where do we want to, who wants to start with questions? Who's going to start on this end? don't have many.
I don't think I have any questions.
We're going to start with you because you might need to leave. So
yeah, I mean, I can give you my feedback once we get to deliberation, but I don't really have any questions. I really appreciate having a clear work plan more than anything, and knowing where we're headed and what we're doing. And my only, I've shared some of the outcomes as I saw them from the emergency housing measure workshop or whatever that was. And so I think that there's some opportunities there that we just should be aware of and make sure that we're continuing to monitor, but I don't necessarily have a question as it relates to that, I don't think. So no questions. Sorry.
Great. Thank you.
Done.
All right. Thank you, sir.
I think only 2 questions. For biomass, do we have a specific site, or that would be part of the feasibility study itself?
That would be more defined in the feasibility study. It would, because we are looking at a facility, at least initially, that would service town hall, the fire building, and the airport. It would be somewhere along this corridor, most likely airport property, but that hasn't been discussed in great detail or defined at all.
Thanks, Jen. And then for the emergency housing measures, I know there were 5 identified in that section in the staff report, but we're talking about only moving forward the long-term rental grant program.
That's our recommendation to focus on right now, for a couple different reasons. There was some conversation about declaring housing as an emergency. That does not come with a funding source. So when we declared an emergency for COVID, it opened up the ability to apply for FEMA reimbursements and to receive funding for that effort. This, at this stage, isn't really clearly defined and doesn't open up that same possibility. What it would allow us to do is to move forward at a staff level with some projects. That means we wouldn't necessarily have to come back to council, because we meet every 2 weeks and we do really try to be nimble and flexible. We don't see a need to make that acceleration and not come back to council at this point. If that changes, we'll respond to that. One of the other items was a moratorium on evictions. There is still the COVID moratorium through September 30th. So we're not sure that's the best use of our staff time right now. Long-term rental grant program, we had some thoughts on that, so that aligned nicely. We have met with landing locals to talk that through, so we're getting really close to being able to bring that if council's interested in that. I think there was some discussion about a moratorium on STR permits as well, and maybe that ties into the long-term rental discussion, maybe it doesn't, but that's why we focused on the grant program specifically.
I did have one additional question if you were, but I don't want to interrupt you.
You go ahead.
It was just quickly on the that was my one question. The opportunity to accelerate the short-term rental conversation. I'm not necessarily a proponent or non-proponent of caps or declining or whatever, but I do think it might behoove us to move that up prior to January, just in an effort. So I was just wondering from a capacity standpoint and or feasibility standpoint, what the opportunity is to move that forward, maybe into fall, maybe more October, November timeline.
Yeah, I'll ask Hillary as the lead on that, kind of the ordinance on that, to weigh in. There's a lot of nuances to a conversation about that and a lot of things to think through. So in terms of timing for fall, I think there was a commitment made that we wouldn't visit that until we had our year long. And that doesn't mean we can't change that, but it would be something to consider.
Yeah, I think there are two possible approaches, or there are probably more than that, but at least two approaches to that. One is if council wanted to sort of make an immediate cap or sort of a temporary step. And then the second is what we had previously envisioned, which is sort of revisiting 1 year the progress of the short-term rental program and more broadly looking at if there are significant updates we want to make to that program. That latter approach was what we had planned for January, and that certainly would be a much more significant effort. So to move that up to the fall would have some fairly significant impacts on staff, on the work plan and other areas.
Thank you.
That was sort of a general answer, but we can get more specific if necessary.
Thank you.
Shall I ask my last question? Okay. So just on the long-term rental grant program, because I know we talked about it not that long ago, right? So I just want to sort of confirm, we feel like we have enough data and information, even though it's been a pretty short time frame, to be able to make some decisions related to some of the potential changes that are included in the staff report.
Yes, so it's actually, I would call it more of a revision, and that the focus, or what we're considering to bring forward, is the focus being on renting rooms versus homes to help with some of the short-term urgency need, and perhaps even offering a shorter term for that incentive, 3 months, 6 months. Let's try to get people who are living in cars or just don't have housing into some at least temporary housing. And that's really what the goal of these revisions would be.
Thanks, Jen.
Councilmember Zabriskie.
So on the biomass facility, the initial outlay for the scoping study would be $20,000?
Just under 20,000, yes.
And then on the emergency housing measure, our town attorney's in the loop on that discussion?
I don't want to answer for Andy. I think he's not participating in the Mountain Housing Council group meeting, but has been included on, I think, on at least an email about what an emergency ordinance would mean, and weighed in on that.
Right, and I think that my general thought is that the declaration of emergency is a tool that could accomplish some things, but I think that it's not a panacea, and I think that the better approach is to try to understand what Mountain Housing Council and others would like to accomplish, and then we can assess what the best route is to get there. Could be a declaration of emergency, probably more likely it's not. There may be other better ways to do whatever they're trying to do.
Okay. On the updated building energy audit, can you say now what we can expect to see from the audit? Is it possible to do that?
I can try to speak to that. This is Dan. So just for reference, in 2018, we hired a consultant that specializes in evaluating buildings and how to make them more energy efficient. So we have that report. What we've done over the course of the past year is implement the most cost-effective and with the highest return on investment elements of that report. So what staff had originally anticipated coming into the budget process was looking at what was next on that list and identifying whether there's additional projects to just kind of work our way down the list. What was suggested by during the council budget workshop was that we update the report before doing that. So that's what's in front of you. So what I would expect would come out of an updated report would be bringing the same consultant team back for efficiency purposes, and then I would expect they would be looking at the measures that they had recommended in the report previously and comparing those against any technology upgrades that may have occurred over the past 2 to 3 years, and then amending their recommendations as appropriate is what I would expect. And then also they would be considering any new facilities we brought online or facilities that maybe previously they didn't look at, and see if we need to, if there's opportunities for energy upgrades there.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
No further questions.
Okay. Yeah, just to tag on that one, with the, I'm assuming Dan, back to you, they would probably be looking at some life cycle costing of maybe some of our older equipment that wasn't wasn't beneficial or there wasn't a great energy gain on the previous recommendations.
Yeah, those would be the types of things I would expect them to look at.
Yeah. Okay, I actually don't have any specific questions. So I would like to just answer Jen's initial question here. Is there any feedback from council on how you would like to see this differently in the future? Pardon?
Public comment?
Public comment. Thank you again. Wow, sorry, you guys. Would the public like to say anything? Come on, Susie. You know, one of our own staff could come and make a public comment too, so we don't have to put all the burden on Susie, but thank you for being here this evening. Okay. Is there any feedback from council on how we would like to see this in the future? This is our first time receiving it. It was a lot of data to process and very small text that I had to keep. Thank goodness I have the iPad and I could just keep expanding and contracting. Other comments?
I will just say that something that I really liked is how you were able to kind of bucket things into, these things are 50% complete, sort of those different completion phases. That's really helpful.
Others? No? Any other comments?
I like sort of the transition of the bike rack stuff too. I think that is also quite helpful. Like, hey, this is still there. It's not going anywhere, but here's some things that are sort of moving, more forward. I think that part is really helpful too. But I mean, the level of detail is pretty robust. So it's good. Thank you.
And I know you and I had talked about a little bit of the crossover of what items support multiple goals, what tasks support multiple goals. And after seeing the level of detail in this, I could understand why that didn't happen this time around. So, I don't have a suggestion for how to make that happen, but I think that would help me understand, because for me, items that are going to be in service to multiple priorities, naturally to me should be the first ones to be addressed if possible, lacking other circumstances or impacts or timeframes. So that is a piece of information that I think would be really helpful moving forward. I can kind of assess that, but what I'm looking for is how staff is assessing that.
And I think what we can do is add a column with a graphic, and maybe it's a house, if it's a housing one, if it's a GHG one, it's a tree or something. We'll pick a graphic and just
add those on. Perfect. That will be very helpful because, of course, I am very graphically oriented, and that will help a lot. Any other comments on that?
Yeah, I don't have any comments on improvements because I'm satisfied with everything you did.
Awesome.
If not more so.
Yeah, and so I guess that's what I would like to do in kicking off the deliberation. It really is amazing how much you have accomplished in 12 weeks with COVID and a lot of other robust projects and public interface. So with the PSOMs and some of the other large projects that we've kicked off with the roundabout and the Legacy Trail, this is really an amazing amount of work. So really, really excited about that. So direction from this end, I understand you're good with these priorities. You're focused on the long-term grant program, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, as the biomass, I'm fine with. And as far as the emergency housing measures, my comment on that is just simply, we're talking about this long-term rental grant program, and we're trying to get people out of short-term renting, and we do have an ability to essentially cap short-term rentals. So to me, we're like paying money to get people to stop short-term renting on one hand, but then yet we're allowing them to short-term rent on the other hand. So if we're really talking about an emergency, I believe we should look at this more holistically. And while I'm not opposed to, I know the long-term rental grant program revisions are going to be ready in a couple of weeks, so I'm not interested in necessarily capping short-term rentals in 2 weeks. I think that is not quite the way to do it, but I do think we should think seriously about what that might look like, because I think a review of the short-term rental program is one thing, and that will happen regardless. It just feels a little bit off. It just doesn't quite feel balanced if we're going to be paying people a whole bunch of taxpayer dollars to do something, and at the same time we're saying go ahead and do it. And if they do it for 1 month and they get a permit and then they decide to come out, all of a sudden we're going to give them 10 grand to come out of the short-term rental program. So we're sort of shooting ourselves in the foot. That's my slight opinion on that one. As far as the building energy audit goes, I'm not going to fight it. It doesn't faze me one way or another. I personally would rather see us spending more time, and especially staff time, on some of the effective things that are in the work plan rather than revisiting that just to revisit it, to potentially do something when we have some pretty solid things in the sustainability part of the work plan that will be sacrificed should we head down this sort of side road. So I'm agnostic. I don't care if you all want to do that. Great. I don't necessarily support it. I would rather see us proceed with some of the other things in the work plan. And that's all. Thank you.
Right. Thanks for the clarity.
You're welcome. And for the rest of council members, I'm going to have to bail in about 15 minutes, so don't think I'm just like walking out. I'm sorry. So the rest of you know.
Okay, so I actually do have one more question. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have here that, for these 3 items, if we accelerate, they may have impacts to other work plan items. And I know in our questions before the meeting tonight, one question was specifically about, biomass, and sort of that would take some more staff time. The budget associated with that is the 20,000, just under 20,000. But what's sort of the scale of the impacts to other work plan items for these other ones?
So some of it's a little too early to say, so that's why I said this May, and when we come back with our second quarterly update, you may hear we didn't progress along this, even though our timeframes said so, because we were focused on biomass or we were focused on long-term rentals. So I just don't want you to be surprised if you hear that when we come back in October. At this point with biomass, we really just don't know enough about how much staff time is going to be included. We will be recommending to stick with the consultant that did the analysis for Quincy and North Star, because they already have some of that information. So that should help with that. For the long-term rental grant program, Shauna's and Hillary have been proactive in getting information from Landing on what that could look like. So we're really looking at the next week and a half of fleshing that out and seeing how refined we can get that before coming back to council if you want to move that forward. So it'll be an intensive amount of time. The beauty of that program is Landing Locals does a lot of the work after the fact. And then the building energy audit, again, is just going to, it would be less time than the previous one, would be my assumption, because you're already starting to work from a base. How much time that would be will depend on the information they need.
So it does sound like we're sort of poised really well right now to move on the first 2, the biomass and the emergency housing measures, and the building energy audit could continue to sort of stay where it is and not accelerate it.
So Hillary did get some information on that and a price quote. It's less than we had budgeted. So we have started to move that forward if you choose to continue that. I don't know if she has any other additional information she wants to add on that based on what she received.
Yeah, that's right. The cost, it would be somewhere between $20,000-$25,000, and we do have that in our budget because this came up during a budget conversation, so we added that in. Our last energy audit, we estimated we had about 120 hours of staff time. We anticipate this one would take somewhat less, but it would be still fairly significant.
So I think I feel kind of similarly that I would love to move the first 2 forward, and I am a little bit more agnostic on the energy audit. Obviously, we just completed some of the projects from the last one. The feasibility for study for biomass also helps move forward some of our goals around sustainability. So we are still doing some sustainability work. I realize it's different than the energy audit. So that's sort of where I'm landing.
Okay, and I probably should have started it with this, but I'm totally in support of accelerating the biomass and the long-term rental grant program. And of course, I want to see the updated building energy audit. However, we are really getting close on the what we're calling a greenhouse gas coalition. The bike rack has it as a climate change JPA with a bunch of other agencies, but we're getting really close on that. We've had some great conversations with Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation and SBC. We have an outline of their various roles, and we have the beginnings of a proposal. So we're hoping to be bringing that to all of the jurisdictions, boards, and to this council fairly soon. That's not going to take a huge amount of staff time, but it will take dedicating staff to go to these meetings once a month or quarterly. And so that would be a higher priority for me, at least initially, over the updated building energy audit. So I want to just put that on the table and see if I have support for that kind of structure. And then building energy audit, it's great. We have the proposal, and as soon as we feel like we have the bandwidth, we can jump on it, because we're supportive of it, and we have it budgeted.
So, Mayor, do you have an idea how much the energy audit is going to help us get towards our November 2020 goal for electrification of town facilities? Will that help or not?
No, it's not really going to move the needle. What it's really going to do is help us walk the talk. And that's an important thing to do, but it's not going to be a really, really significant greenhouse gas emission reduction. It will do some, and I'm hoping that the proposal or that the report will come back with some possibly innovative programs and maybe testing some heat pumps and some things that we can then show other agencies, hey, this is possible, this is successful, this is how we did it, and we'll help you do it too. Those are the types of things that I would hope to accomplish with the building energy audit and possible project implementation, but I think that's more of a longer-term goal. My thoughts on it. And what are your thoughts on what is presented before us, Councilmember Zabriskie?
On all of these, I just want to do what the mayor wants to do. No, I'm for the biomass facility. I'm for accelerating biomass facility emergency housing measures, and I think the Greenhouse Gas Coalition is a better idea than the building energy audit.
Perfect. Thank you. Love it. Councilmember Romack.
I agree with Councilmember Zabriskie. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to look back to this end. Do you have any concerns on this end with that shift?
No, I didn't know if anybody wanted to chime in on short-term rental concept or not. If not, great. If you do, now's the time.
No, I want to validate your point there. It is very clear that we need to better support that housing market, and we're not doing so by allowing it to be completely wide open like we are now. The timing of that's the critical one. I know we're going to address it. It's just how soon can we address it?
What I got from Councilmember Pallavi is I should short-term rent my house now and then deed restrict it. It's kind of like flipping a house, yeah.
Okay, let's not go there.
Okay. I agree with Councilmember Pallavi. I think that was very perceptive in what he was saying. He makes a good point.
Yeah. So then, did you have some comments on that?
Well, I was just going to ask Councilmember Pallavi, what sort of detail were you thinking on this? Because, just hearing from Hillary, trying to move forward the whole look at the whole program, would be hard to do quickly. So I'm curious from your perspective, what you were looking for.
And you and I obviously talked about this offline. And the point, to our private conversation as well was, I don't believe that you restrict short-term rentals for the sake of restricting short-term rentals without anything else to support that. I'm not interested in just saying no more short-term rentals. If we're gonna say we're going to put a cap, or we are going to start to limit, or we want to start looking at potentially even a declining number of licenses over a time period, right? In order to get housing stock back, in order to change all of these metrics, at some point we have to be able to have that conversation. Are we ready to have that conversation next week or probably in 30 days? Probably not. Is waiting till January too long? I don't also know. The real estate market has been very challenging. I think what I'm trying to maybe more make a point of is that we need to be aware that we are now incentivizing with tax dollars people to stop short-term renting. And yet at the same time, we're saying, go ahead and do whatever you want. So we have to find whatever that balance is. I think we have to maybe look at a slightly faster timeline, but only slightly. And what we will do, and I've already started this conversation with Visit Truckee-Tahoe, and at the very least trying to make sure that we are hearing from all constituencies, is understand either what the concerns are or not. So really what I'm saying is, as part of the short-term rental ordinance update, I think we should be taking it a step further and not simply looking at an ordinance update, but be looking at a cap and or a declining number of licenses, and that is going to take time. We're not going to be able to come back in January and be like, okay, here's everything. We need to put some work into understanding what do we want, right? Just the same way we're going to say, do we want 20% deed restricted houses? Well, we can also say, what's a healthy number of short-term rentals compared to the types of units that we have? So we need to start putting some numbers exactly the same way that Mountain Housing Council put those numbers. So my point is very simply that I think that item 1.7 on the work plan needs a little more meat to it and potentially has broader policy implications that need to be started working on potentially sooner.
In particular, the collection of the data.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, I would agree. Okay.
Yes.
All right, it looks like we have consensus on that. So, is there anything else? Do we need to clarify anything else for staff on that item or others?
I think we hear you loud and clear. You'll be seeing a scoping study and more discussion about biomass coming in the very few weeks, as well as long-term rental grant revisions. We are not going to move forward with the building energy audit at this time, but a standalone item related to the GHG coalition will come forward when we have more details about what that would involve for council consideration. And then we will be starting to think through what that conversation means for short-term rentals in terms of capping, declining caps, and how we want to engage the community on that, so you have all the information you need to make a decision.
That sounds quite accurate. Okay. Any adjustments? We're good. Okay. So you don't need a motion or anything on this either?
I do not. I think we're very clear.
Okay. Then let's jump to council reports and go. And then you got to get out of here.
Congratulations. I did not have faith. I will be honest. Happy July 4th. What the heck have I been doing? Had some great meetings regarding just a ton of recreation advocacy going on right now, both federally and state. I had a great opportunity to meet with Peter Fenolio from CAT. I think we talked for almost 3 hours. About an entire range of things. It was fantastic. Attended a couple of Mountain Housing Council meetings related to the emergency ordinances, along with a meeting meeting tomorrow to follow up on sort of a private enterprise, just so you all know. I think the private business community is finally starting to take notice that there's been a lot of public investment, and there is a sort of renewed sense of vigor at the private end to start to assist with some of these programs. And there seems to be some great momentum there. I don't know if you're going to be joining us tomorrow or not, but it is starting to move forward. And I've been working a lot. That's about it. This is what my calendar tells me. There was a CCC meeting, all the good stuff. And what else happened? The Music in the Park came back, so attended that. And Truckee Thursdays is Thursday, so get out there and have fun, everybody, and be happy to be back together. Thank you so much. I will now depart. Thank you.
Right. See ya. All right, Vice Mayor Henderson.
Okay, thank you. I attended the Truckee River Basin Water Group meeting. We talked about water flows, balancing fishing needs, rafting needs. I actually learned that the top 3 feet of Lake Tahoe evaporates every year. So when it's really, really dry, the goal is really to keep water out of the lake. I did a nearly 4-hour ride along and tour of some of our town's current project sites, potential project sites with Dan Wilkins. So Dan, I know I've said it before, but thank you so much for all of that. It was wonderful. We went to the Public Works Courtyard. I got to meet a bunch of our public works staff, which was lovely because we don't get to interact with them as often. We looked at the future phase of the Legacy Trail along the river, potential additional future egress for Tahoe Donner, the rail yard, and others. I met with David Diamond of the Airport Board. I talked about biomass, the public power outages we might be facing, and housing. I did a walkthrough of Sierra Meadows in relation to the vegetation mitigation project with one of our concerned community members. I met with the Friends of the Library to talk about sort of the land discussions and formation of a JPA for stakeholders for the development of a new library for our area. As I mentioned earlier, I did meet with someone from Park City about their sort of current effort around deed restricting housing solutions that they're working to move forward. Let's see, tuned into Good Morning Truckee this morning to learn more about our drought conditions, and also had a conversation with Peter Fenolio of CAT today in relation to the below market rate item that we had on the agenda today. I think that's it.
Well, it's been 3 weeks, but you were busy. That's
always
awesome. Yes, always. Okay, Councilmember Zabriskie.
I attended the Truckee North Tahoe Transportation Management Association's regular meeting with Lindsay wearing her other hat. And then also Rotary the last time had a presentation from the Bentonville biking group. They have a tremendous mountain biking operation there that has really changed the town, along with Sam Walton. And then the Mountain Housing Council today sponsored Hopkins Village. That project is just now under construction. It's going to be 1,700 square foot homes, 3 bedrooms. Cost of construction is about $300 a square foot, and it's going to go for $550,000 if the builder can't get an increase from the county. And so it'd go to people with an AMI of 180%. And then also Good Morning Truckee, I watched that too on the drought conditions, particularly in Martis Valley. You have a concern about that. And then I attended a building working group meeting for the first time, and that was exciting.
Thank you. Councilmember Romack.
Yeah, as Councilmember Zabriskie mentioned, I was at the Truckee North Tahoe Transportation Management Association. Also with Councilmember Zabriskie, I attended the Truckee Rotary, where we heard a presentation, I think Gary was his name, in Bentonville, that works on trails, so that was pretty neat to see. Along with Councilmember Pallavi, I attended the Mountain Housing Council emergency meeting, where a lot of the topics that we just kind of went over were discussed. Listened in this morning to Good Morning Truckee. And also shout out to Sierra Meadows neighbors. There was a great 4th of July parade in my neighborhood, just put on by neighbors. It was super cute. Lots of dogs and kids and bikes and loud music. So that was fantastic. And that's it.